Hey folks, and I'm back. Started that screen to make sure it's fine. Asher, observation. Man of science though he was, the first thing Asher Mayer did was shoot the damned thing. The pyramid hovered inside Io's atmosphere, close enough to be impacted by a projectile flung at sufficient speed. The time it took Asher to blink twice, he knew the angle of attack and the mass of the projectile. Asher finished building the mounted railgun before his coffee had cooled. He charged the magnetic coils, waited for the wind to die down, and broadsided the ship. Expected the projectile hit a kinetic barrier, or best case scenario, impact the pyramid, and cause utterly infinitesimal damage. Instead, at the moment of impact, the projectile stopped existing. Asher's brow furrowed, while an irrepressible smile crept across his face. His metal arm clinked and hummed gently of its own accord. This pyramid had the audacity to park in front of his laboratory and pull such a cheap trick. Clearly he had not thought it would meet Asher Mir. He assembled another missile, one with a detectable radiation signature and a radio signal. He fired it at the pyramid. It similarly disappeared on impact, the signal stuffed out, no longer detectable from Io's surface. Another payload followed, one with a miniature relay station. He routed it through his console and fired. The moment it touched the pyramid, it transmitted a spike of radiation and radio broadcast. Asher smirked. They were still there, held in the field of the pyramid, visually undetectable, signals squelched, but still physically there. Unless it's a rift to another space and time, another space. You know, they might be physically somewhere, but not just floating around the pyramid. Anyway, how the pyramid was accomplishing this feat was unimportant at the moment. His mind flooded with fancies of zero-point power. The question that gave him pause was the what. What was this ship doing to the projectiles as they sat in suspended space in the periphery of its loathsome shape? And why? Deputy Commander Sloan watched the overloaded Vanguard skiff dip close to the waves. Watch it, she barked into the communicator, and the craft traded out. That's liquid methane down there, and if it don't kill you, the Leviathan will. Come on, there ain't no Leviathan, said the pilot, his voice crackling. He was some boy from the city, who couldn't have been more than 17 years old. And if that's methane, how come you don't got a helmet on? Sloan grinned. She wasn't used to backtalk. Because I moisturized short timer, Sloan said in squelched comms. A phone cretch screamed overhead, and Sloan was on the catwalk outside the rig in a flash. She bellowed at the men working on the deck to cover some of the cargo as she drew her scout rifle and dropped to a knee. First few dregs were dead before they hit the ground, but the winds whipping off the seas sent her next shots wide. She figured the landing party would go for the cargo shuttle over her men, so she spun to take a sightline towards the craft. But things were charging for supplies instead. She cursed and leapt over the railing, landing like a crash of lightning. Her Egress sprang to life. Sarens watched this as a supply craft via a stinger looking for a place to put down. On link pad 5 south side, she shouted over the crack of her rifle. Offload what you brought, and I'll have a supply team swing by in a minute. She plugged 2 more dregs, and the Kretsch's engines changed from roar to a whine. A half-hearted volley of wire rifle fire spattered the landing pad from the ketch as it blasted away. Sloan called out to her team, no fatalities, nothing taken, but 2 crates of fresh supplies. She ordered the team to next landing pad, began climbing the long stairs back to her perch. They hadn't hit while they were loading the Golden Age technology for shipment back to the city. They're after supplies. They were leaving. She looked up at the pyramid in the sky and frowned. The door to her office closed and sealed with a hiss. A soft blue light on the panel promised that the seal was airtight. Sloan walked across the room to watch the seas through the open hole blown inside of her rig. Yeah, airtight seal is kind of worthless with that. She had tried everything. The Great Bray, her lineage, a promise to save them. For all her genius and moxie, this was beyond her. Rasputin lay dying in a dozen empty screens splayed out across Anna's command station. She could visualize the bleeding code running through her fingers. Zavala's voice was in her ear as ambient haze, relegated to the background of her mind like distant gunfire. The image of the pyramid's distortion wave was still raw. This wasn't an attack, it was a command. Lazy dismissal of older best laid plans. There was no explosions, no blaring sirens or sparks of dramatic electricity. Nothing to combat or fix. Just a guardian walled inside sound black glass and disbelief. She'd been so sure. Anna's eyes tracked Jinyu as the ghost sped from console to console, attaching strings of light to each. They slowed her as she went, buried under some load. Anna, Jinyu's voice strained under the crushing distortion. I think I've got him. Most of him, but not for long. The words cut through the distant gunfire. What? Anna asked. Her voice came softly at first, unsure what form to take as the information processed. What? Jinyu groaned and whispered exasperately. Pillory engram. It's not ready. Anna, now. It'll go insane. I can't. The light tethers attached to Jinyu began to pop one by one. It's this or nothing. The prospect sent Anna across the room. She belted the command into the air, and a force safe opened in response. Anna snatched the decahedron enclosure from the safe and braced it in front of Jinyu. Jinyu, do it. Ghost Shell reformed to forge a direct structure before her core erupted with light and data. A stream of pure information beamed into the engram, filling it with swirling wisps of light. Did you? As much as I could. Outside, but weren't there fragments of the guy scattered around the place? So there was damage to combat. Anyway, outside the windows, bolts of atmospheric friction dragged flames through the sky as warsats pummeled from low orbit defense positions. Their impacts were distant. Brother Van's smile fell as the Titan entered his sanctum. The smell was unmistakable. Ancient gunpowder, burnt oil, scorched Vex fluid, the burnt tang of steel overused for 100 lifetimes. You have the perfect paradox, Van said, his voice as steady as he could imagine. His hands extended. He extended his hands. May I? The Titan shrugged, then dug into his pack for the shotgun. He placed it into Vance's waiting hands.
Security scans in progress.
He ran his fingers over the barrel and tested the weight of the stock. Ah, he said. Not the original perfect paradox, is it? Titan stood in confusion. Vance waited for a moment with his head tilted before he continued. Did not claim this weapon from the tomb of Saint 14, but instead through some fractaline-powered tesseract, yes? Titan nodded, then stood for a long moment looking at the blind man. That sundial made it, he said finally. Vance's grip tightened on the gun. It was heavy, loaded with 8 shells, tactical mag. Getting this one had taken some time. And how many lifetimes did you totally tether to our own for this weapon? Our world now bears the strain of how many additional realities in exchange for this hollow abomination? Vance's mind swam at the thought of the infinite web that pulled on the shotgun. How many fractaline did you sacrifice for this? 400 fragments? He paused aghast. More? It's got a trench barrel, the Titan said helpfully. Remove yourself from my sanctum, Vance said, placing the shotgun down like a dead animal. You've accelerated the end of all things. I must update my prophecies accordingly. It's more of a jackass than Mir is in this. Asher cursed his way across the aisle. As he picked his way across the rocky outcrops, he cursed the loose soil underfoot, cursed his oversized pack, cursed the roving taken, cursed the kick of his silicon neuromal rifle against his shoulder. He looked up at the pyramid, funneling its foul energies down into the cradle and sneered. Well read as he was, he didn't have the energy to arrange the required words. It was late during what passed for night on Isle, and while Asher was tired, he hiked diligently. He stopped only once, briefly, to study a snail whose shell was growing tiny clusters of crystalline black obelisks. He crept down through the cavernous spaces beneath the cradle. Unfamiliar roots protruded from the earthen walls. He calmly observed the pattern of a twitching shrieker, and his calculated ricochet sent a band of taken roaring down the wrong pathway. He passed unmolested. Egress was in her meager camp near the twisted roots of the enormous tree. She knelt near a beam of light coming from far above, which filtered through the pit of the tree to strike an unnatural splash of Cambrian petals. Asher noted the smells of sap and burnt cooking oil. She said she was pleased to see him, though when she sought to clarify the cadence of his supply drops, though when she sought to clarify the cadence of his supply drops, he felt she might be put off by the unexpected visit. As he unpacked what he brought her, she explained the tree, the messages, the whispers, the thrilling struggle to glimpse the face of the unknown, even if that unknown may be trying to kill you. As she was smiling as she spoke. Asher understood exactly what she meant. He rested by the fire. Nearby was a small table that held samples of hive chitin, clippings from the tree, Ashley's soil, an open notebook that Asher saw was a personal journal, which he quickly flipped shut with distaste. He reached again into his pack. He brought forth a bottle of fine golden spirits, from when some towering ignoramus misunderstood his request for isopropyl alcohol. Christ, I had a pain in the ass trying to get that. Needed it when I was trying to fix up my PC. And I have it here now. Probably should put this somewhere better than just randomly to one side. Leave it on the bed for a moment. But yeah, it was a pain in the ass. Went to multiple places, and it was only a pharmacy over in town that had it, and it was the last bottle in the store, like 20 quid. And to be honest, I didn't really need it. I could have just handed it into that IT store in town, but I didn't know they existed till recently. So yeah, could have saved my money on that, but again, I didn't know they existed. And by cleaning it up, I got a better shot at putting the PC together. So got a bit more experience out of it. And placed it on the table. He brought 2 clean glasses, nestled ridiculously in the boxy shipping case of a large graduated cylinder. He removed one and placed it gently next to the bottle. Asher coughed, relaced his boots, and stood and shouldered his pack. You've things taken care of, yes? He said to Egress. Certainly, she said, intent on the beam of whirling light. He shifted and made a little noise in his throat. I need to know that things are taken care of, he said clearly. Iris looked over and considered the man standing across from her. To the best of my ability, she said finally. She finally said. Asher nodded and began his long walk back. Wavebreaker. Deputy Commander Sloan was in a foul mood, and Amanda Holliday, bless her heart, had no idea. Titan's waves crashed relentlessly against the massive support struts of Saren's watch. Were things different? A crew would be down there right now, swinging between the mammoth legs, working to repair and stabilize. But things weren't different. You can throw together a box girder and reinforce it, no problem, Amanda said. You can, I can't, said Sloan. While she'd built a few walls, Amanda had an enviable engineering background to fall back on, though it seemed she wasn't much of a teacher. Amanda's hologram slurped ramen. How long do you need it to last for? Long enough to get it out of my mind, said Sloan. Since it started wobbling, I haven't had time to worry about the pyramid. Small favors, chirped Amanda. Sloan ran a hand through her coarse hair. Come on, Amanda groaned. You're sitting on a mess of Golden Age technology on Titan. There's got to be an engram with a bridge inside it. Sloan stared flatly. That might actually be true, but Sloan didn't have time to hunt for lost technologies. Make a wave breaker then. Tetraprods bolt against the strut, or better yet, something out in the sea to break the wave early. If you can't take it when it hits you, you go out and hit it before it gets started. Like this. Amanda leans forward and did something in a Rama bowl that Sloan obviously couldn't see. They're not looking, Amanda said. She tilted her bowl forward just enough to spill broth over her desk. She cried out with laughter. I'm hanging up now, said Sloan, and did a cheery wave at Amanda's melodramatic pout. And after a cheery wave at Amanda's melodramatic pout she did. The hologram faded out, leaving Sloan in the dark. She stayed there for a long time. Anna. Zavala set down 2 glasses. He watched Anna's face as he poured velvet-looking liquor and filled them. Her eyes were focused on the grains of his desk. How to the unobservant they would fade away into the greater canvas of wood, indistinguishable from each other. Trafalgar hung behind them, buried in a darkening cloud, a part of and apart from the sky. I can't believe we lost, she said. We are not lost. Zavala pushed a glass towards Anna. I froze. We still don't know what, if anything, can be saved. It's not so easy to act and face a defeat. The prospect of a future is something we have to keep in mind. Anna glared at Zavala. Nothing we do is supposed to be easy. Isn't that the point? This was a stress test, and I buckled. Fate, Anna. You reminded me that we wrap ourselves in the doubt of past failures. Without you, the city would be ash and rubble. More than once. Anna scooped the glass in her hand. She smelled the liquor, winced, and placed it back on the table. He believed in me. Rasputin was my job. And he still is. A job for the future, Zavala said and sipped his drink. Now we have a new job. Harris needs our support. Tell me everything isn't over. When Cade passed, I saw the fracturing of the vanguard as a path towards inevitable failure. Still, it has proved impossible to fill a seat. I believe I would be too weak to lead without the balance added by his unique perspectives. As it turns out, his life was but one in an eternity of choices. Sorry, I read ahead a bit. It helps me not stumble over the words. So, I don't want... Relax, I'm not offering you the job. Unless you killed Cade, and if I had the wrong man this whole time. If I did, would you forgive me? I'd understand, he said and smiled. Cora told me back then that an object in motion stays in motion. I've always admired the phrase, but I admit it can be difficult to adhere to. Anna shook her head. That's just physics. A fundamental aspect of life. He watched Anna's mood lighten as she considered his words. We find the footholds we can, and we make the best step given the ground we have before us. Anna nodded. Whatever happened to Kate's chicken? Zavala sighed. I believe Saint anointed it as some sort of pigeon lord. Anna's jaw melted into a smile. Life does not wait for us, no matter how long we live it. Drink your drink. Zavala chuckled, his glass to his face. For the Lord of Pigeons summons us to attack the pyramids. I'm not sure what Kate's chicken is. Maybe it's his ghost or something. But, I liked Cade. We'll still see more of him as we go through the other campaigns. But, since I'm operating in present Destiny, he's dead. And there's no coming back. That's the end of it. It feels like too much of an asshole to suddenly yank him back. The music rang clear and true. Brother Vance listened, his face a parodism of glory. It repeats, he whispered to himself, and the young warlock was bent over the infinite forge, diligently crafting weapons. From another age. She listened politely, but heard nothing. She went back to her task. Why do none pity the phoenix? The warlock looked up, startled. Vance was across from her, though she had not noticed his approach. His question came with no preamble, as if the two had been in the midst of a conversation. I'm sorry, offered the warlock. Endless rebirth true, but each matched by a fiery death. Vance said, no sooner does it clean the ash from its fetters, does it fall again to flame. Well, it's obviously a nod to Guardians with their eternal death and rebirth. And there is often sympathy for such a thing. People often say that they would hate eternal life because beyond the death of loved ones, the suffering that comes with it. And you could obviously spin that into if your eternal life was to die and reincarnate repeatedly, even if you had the same mind. Especially if it's the same mind, that would be hell because you remember each death, or at least have the idea of it. The more you know of it, the more horrific it will be. So, still, I welcome that over true death. I'm sure after long enough I'll be too mad to notice the difference, so, yeah. It wouldn't matter to me. The blind man turned and bathed his face in the glowing sunlight that streamed into his sanctum. And none speak of its song. The warlock thanked Vance for the use of his forge and stood to leave. You are more than welcome, he said without turning his head, though his vacant smile had grown kind. He gestured towards the tomes and scrolls on his desk. Help yourself to a prophecy, friend, he said. I believe I have finally finished my studies. Her conclusion. As Asher watched his assistant's ship tear into orbit for the last time, it occurred to him that he not expressed how truly satisfactory he had found some of their work. He briefly entertained the thought of leaving a letter, but there were others more deserving of his thoughts, and if he worked in descending priority, he might never make it to his assistant, which would defeat the purpose of the exercise completely. Instead, he went to the Pyramidion. The Vex were not born, yet not created. Desire to understand this conundrum brought Ash to Io, reasoned that the pyramid, with its alien resources and noble power, likely come for the same purpose. The dark ship sought to take the secrets of the Vex for itself. But Asher had already staked his claim, and was prepared to defend it. He stood at the gate of the Pyramidion. The Vex security responded as they knew they would, and he was prepared. He piled their broken corpses on the plates and continued inside. He destroyed the first 100 Vex, and then the second. A mantle roared into being before him, and he crushed its Radolarian core in his metal fist. He really does have a spirit of a guardian. He climbed forward over their clawing limbs. He slipped into the cooling rocks of their dead fluid. Asher swallowed a mouthful of blood and kept moving. He paused by a swirling gate and watched their periodic waves, then stepped through at the only passable moment. He walked steadily through the laser grids that seemed to bend around him. He hung calmly in a gravitational tourbillon as the ground beneath him flickered and shifted madly, and the Vex began to observe. The corridors of the Pyramidion were lined with glowing red eyes. The metal mannequin stood dumbly, twitching, shuddering as Asher passed. A familiar area unfolded before him, a cubist sinkhole reeking with the flat, base stench of steel mud and bleach. He looked where the sky should be and found another impossible shape, another fractal contradiction. Far above him, placid in its Penrose vortex, the vast Radolarian lake lapped gently at the metallic shores. The man reached up to the lake with his metal arm. He then reached for his arm of flesh. He reached with both, and then he brought the lake down.
Security seek check-in. All positions clear.
Okay, that just sounds like he suicided. After she watched the Guardian ship roar off Titan for the last time,
System data.
Deputy Commander Sloan went into her office and put on the Golden Age technology she'd claimed from the Hive. The heavy power source hung from her shoulders like a bandolier. She draped it across her neck and stepped into the suit, vast and clumsy. She bowed her head into the grey hood. A view screen appeared before her. She did not understand the language, not yet, but chose the green option. With a hiss, the suit conformed to her shape. It was heavy, but she had full range of movement. She focused on her arm, concentrated. The material scabbed into thick, armored plates. That was something. She tried to form arc energy, but the suit blocked her light. Or perhaps she would have to learn how to flex her light through the suit. Selected another option with her eyes, and selected again to confirm. There was no pain as she felt the suit snake a cold tube through her side and crawl somewhere near her stomach. That answered a few of her questions. Sloan lurched outside. There was a storm, like Titan was trying to drive off the invader that sat lazily in the sky. She walked into the gale, and the rain beaded on her second skin. Each step was easier than the last as the suit adjusted to her gait. A symbol flashed, and a hive troll charged her. She gripped by its neck and arm before tearing it apart. It was so easy. She laughed then, and the suit interpreted it as a battle cry and amplified it, broadcasting it. The sound echoed off the discarded shipping containers on the rainy landing pads, echoed through Siren's watch and up to the pyramid. Lightning flashed in the sky, and the storm raged on. As Anna Bray watched the Guardian Sparrow rocket across Hell's Basin for the last time, saw a confidant who had believed in her when no one else would. That fate, Zavala had reminded her, was a bond with more power than all the Warmind weapons in the system. It was a promise to go on, an agreement that there was still a future. Jinyu had called it reverse salvage. She knew a thing or two about building something from the wreckage of their past. The building was nearly empty. She'd sent as much tech to the tower as they could handle, and her freight vessels worked, packed to bursting. She turned to the large glass window overlooking silent Warsack cannons. There was no cabal. The death buried beneath Mars had quieted. Valkyrie subroutines that could be maintained remotely remained active, just in case. Jinyu ran final checks on the jump ship. A dark pyramid loomed overhead. An experimental exo chassis was secured in the ship's cargo hold, one foot in front of the other. Vance. Passari. After guarding left his sanctum for the last time, Brother Vance collected his few belongings and stepped into the scorching surface of Mercury, found the entrance to the infinite forest easily, as though he had practiced the journey endlessly in his mind. Because he had. This time he went true. The forest roared. He was struck by the dizzying void of it. The echoes made no sense. He took his first step into the hallowed place and fell to his knees vomiting. He struggled with his pack as a tempest beat on his eardrums. He withdrew his infinite simulacrum, impossibly small in this immense space, and with tumbling fingers synchronized it to the frequency of the crack in the forest. It tickled like a metronome, and then silence. The forest was sealed. Tentatively, Vance felt his way across the enormous stone he stood on. At the same time, he skipped effortlessly from the stone as if he'd done so countless times before. At the same time, he soared, and he was moving in every direction, falling, laughing, singing, down every path into every reality, spreading his message of hope. In the original, the true Vance felt his infinite parallels erupt from him. He felt them bear him up as they passed. "Thank you," he said wordlessly, unable to breathe from joy, and felt 100,000 touches of reassurance. He found he was weeping. There, in the swirl of his golden echoes, Brother Vance lifted his voice and began his song. Some hope for his own voice answered from behind him. The future, it continued. Vance leapt towards it. He recognized the feel of his own cloak. His hands found its throat. Its form twisted, turning cold and sharp beneath his hands. It threw Vance on his back, but he held on. He pushed his hands up the thing's face, under its blindfolds, and dug in it with his thumbs. It howled. How unfortunate, Vance thought to himself behind his wide smile, that you still have eyes. That was something. That was dark acid trip. it's kind of creepy. I don't know how to describe it. Everything feels lacking. It just, Jesus. Do I have an complete over here? Okay, these are all out of order. Alright, like 10, 25, 35, 37, 41. Alright, I have nothing else complete as far as I know. Oh, I do. Okay. So there'll be one more that I'll record now. Aspect. This is complete, so I'll be doing it next.